Good day. I'm going to discuss chemical and toxic substance used in building construction. Toxicology and public health. People are exposed to a wide range of hazardous substance in air, water, and food. This includes organic chemicals such as pesticides and other industrial chemicals, metals, airborne particles such as fibers, and those produced by fossil fuel combustion, and biological agents such as fungi and bacteria. These exposures may occur in our workplaces, in our homes, or outdoors. How toxins progress through the body. Food and water, it goes to ingestion, GI tract, liver, and bile. So, meaning the final product will be the feces. Air, it is the inhaled or inhalation. It goes through our lungs, and of course, it also enters the GI tract. Then, it is exhaled to air, but through lungs, it goes to our blood and lymph. It passes through kidneys, then goes to our bladder, and the byproduct here is our urine. Once that these toxins is in close contact with our skin, it goes to dermal absorption, blood, and limbs. So it also affects other organs, fats, and it also affects our bones. So these are the exposures, how our body is absorbed, and they are also stored, and later on they are eliminated. Toxic hazards and their effects. Carcinogen cause cancer. Mutagens cause genetic damage. Reproductive hazards. Teratogens harm the unborn child. Hazardous chemicals in construction and associated products. Alkyl phenol, a derivative of phenol having one or more alkyl groups attached to the carbon ring. Asbestos, a heat-resistant fibrous silicate mineral that can be woven into fabrics and is used in fire-resistant and insulating materials such as brake linings. Asbestos effect, it causes lung cancer and mesothelioma. Asbestos exposure can also cause cancer of the larynx and ovary. Current evidence also suggests asbestos exposure may cause cancer of the pharynx, stomach, and colorectum. People concerned about asbestos exposure should visit their doctor or other medical provider. Bisphenol A, abbreviated as BPA, stands for bisphenol A, an industrial chemical that has been used to make certain plastic and resins since the year 1950s. BPA is found in polycarbonate plastics and epoxy resins, Polycarbonate plastics are often used in containers that store food and beverages, such as water bottles. Cadmium. Breathing high levels of cadmium damages people's lungs and can cause death. Exposure to low levels of cadmium in air, food, water, and particularly in tobacco smoke over time may build up cadmium in the kidneys and cause kidney disease and fragile bones. Cadmium is considered a cancer-causing agent. Chlorinated polyethylene, abbreviated as CPE, is a kind of full macromolecule materials with white powder appearance. It is non-toxic and tasteless. It has excellent weather resistant, ozone resistance, chemical resistance, and aging resistance. That is why it is highly recommended to use this type of PVCs. Chlorobenzene. Chronic long-term exposure to humans to chlorobenzene affects the central nervous system, or the CNS. Signs of neurotoxicity in humans include numbness, cyanosis, hyperesthesia, increased sensation, and muscle spasms. No information is available on the carcinogenic effects of chlorobenzene in humans. Chlorofluorocarbon, known as CFC, at high concentrations, they can be acutely toxic, causing a number of adverse effects, including central nervous system, depression, bronchial constriction, chest tightness, cough, difficulty in breathing, pulmonary edema, dizziness, headache, confusion, incoordination, asphyxia, and cardiac sensitization. So, number one, if you could see here that in this diagram, you could see that because of sun's beam, the ozone layer is already becoming depleted because of this compound, known as the CFCs. So what are the ill effect of it? CFCs are emitted and reach the ozone layer. CFCs are broken down by the sun's ultraviolet rays, and chlorine atoms are released into the ozone layer, thus causing a chain resolution of the ozone layer. So this causes its depletion. Third, harmful ultraviolet rays reaching the Earth's increase. So harmful ultraviolet rays, it can already penetrate our atmosphere. So the stratosphere is already being destroyed, and once that it is already destroyed, this already causes the global warming, and the lower portion of our atmosphere is called the troposphere. Chloroprine symptoms reported from acute short-term human exposure to high concentrations of chloroprine include giddiness, headache, irritability, dizziness, insomnia, fatigue, respiratory irritation, cardiac palpitations, chest pains, nausea, gastrointestinal disorders, dermatitis, temporary hair loss, and conjunctivitis. Chlorosulfonated polyethylene, abbreviated as CSPE, environmental and health concerns. Known emission resulting from burning or incineration include hydrogen chloride, or known as CHI, carbon monoxide, or abbreviated as CO, sulfur dioxide, SO2, organic acids, aldehydes, and alcohols. Formaldehyde, at higher levels, formaldehyde exposure can cause skin rashes, shortness of breath, wheezing, and changes in lung function. Children, the elderly, and people with asthma or other breathing problems may be more sensitive of the effects of formaldehyde. Halogenated flame retardants. What are some of the potential health effects associated with flame retardants? Endocrine and thyroid disruption, impacts to the immune system, reproductive toxicity, it also causes cancer, adverse effect on fetal and child development, neurologic function. Hexavalent chromium, aka known as chromium 6. It can irritate the nose, throat, and lungs. Repeated or prolonged exposure can damage the mucous membranes of the nasal passages and result in ulcers. In severe cases, exposure causes perforations of the septum, the wall separating the nasal passages. Lead, health problems caused by lead. The effect is short-term or overexposure to lead are abdominal pain, constipated, tired, headache, irritable, loss of appetite, memory loss, pain, or tingling in. Depending on the level of exposure, lead can adversely affect the nervous system, kidney function, immune system, reproductive and developmental system, and the cardiovascular system. Lead exposure also affects the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Mercury, health effects of exposures to mercury. Elemental, metallic, mercury tremors, emotional changes such as mood swings, irritability, nervousness, excessive shyness, insomnia, neuromuscular changes. Mercury and its compounds affect the central nervous system, kidneys, and liver, and can disrupt immune processes, causes tremors, impaired vision and hearing, paralysis, insomnia, and emotional instability. Perfluorinated compound known as PFCs. In animal studies, some PFCs disrupt normal endocrine activity, reduce immune function, cause adverse effect on multiple organs, including the liver and pancreas, and cause developmental problems in rodent offsprings exposed in the womb. Polychlorinated biphenyls, known as PCBs. PCBs have been demonstrated to cause a variety of adverse health effects. They have been shown to cause cancer in animals as well as a number of serious non-cancer health effects in animals, including effects on the immune system, reproductive system, nervous system, endocrine system, and other health effects. Polyvinyl chloride, known as PVC. Most polyvinyl chloride is used to make plastic and vinyl products. Acute, short-term exposure to high levels of vinyl chloride in air has resulted in central nervous system effect, or known as CNS, such as dizziness, drowsiness, and headaches in humans. Polyvinyl leadine chloride, known as PVDC, the primary acute short-term effect in humans from vinylidene chloride exposure are on the central nervous system, or known as CNS, including CNS depression and symptoms of inebriation, convulsion, spasms, and unconsciousness at high concentrations. Phthalates health effects on human, a family of industrial chemical used to soften polyvinyl chloride or PVC, plastic, and as solvents in cosmetics and other consumer products, can damage the liver, kidneys, lungs, and reproductive system. Exposure in the womb and during childhood can lead to health problems later in life. Studies find that phthalates may increase allergies and change how male reproductive organs develop. BPA may cause behavioral problems in children and has been linked to asthma, obesity, and diabetes. Short-chain chlorinated paraffins, known as SCCPS exposure, disturb glycolysis and amino acids metabolism and lead to the upregulation of glutamate metabolism and urea cycle. Major toxic effects associated with subchronic or chronic oral exposure to short-chain chlorinated paraffins have been used as flame retardants in commercial furnitures, particularly in automobile upholstery. Hazard, communication, and chemical safety. Introduction. All have both a need and right to know the hazards and identities of the chemicals they are exposed to when working as identified in hazard communication program. What is hazard communication? Hazard communication, also known as HAZCOM, is a set of processes and procedures that some professionals must implement in the workplace to effectively communicate hazards associated with chemicals during handling, shipping, and any form of exposure. What is and chemical safety? Chemical safety is achieved by undertaking all activities involving chemicals in such a way as to ensure safety of human health and the environment. Chemical safety has many scientific and technical components. Hazard communication standard, evaluation, labels. Evaluation, chemical manufacturers and importers are required to evaluate the hazards of the chemicals they produce or import. Labels, prepare labels and safety data sheets to convey the hazard information to their downstream customers. Safety data sheets for their exposed workers and train them to handle the chemicals properly. route of exposure, absorption, inhalation, ingestion, injection. Absorption of chemical through the skin or mucous membranes can be a common chemical exposure route. Inhalation. Chemicals that can enter the body via inhalation include gases, vapors of volatile liquids, mist, and spray of liquid and solid chemicals in the form of particles, fibers, and dust. Ingestion. Ingestion of chemicals can result from hand-to-mouth contacts, consuming contaminated food or drink. Injection. Chemicals exposure by means of injection can inadvertently occur when handling chemically contaminated items. Control measures. Engineering controls minimize exposure by either reducing or removing the hazard at the source or isolating the worker from the hazard. Engineering controls. Substitution. Substituting for a less hazardous material, equipment, or process. Engineering controls. Process change. Changing a process to make it less hazardous. Engineering controls. Isolation. Separating personnel from hazardous operations, processes, equipment, or environments. Engineering controls. Ventilation. Two fundamental approaches: general exhaust and local exhaust of air contaminants. Engineering controls. Source modification. Changing a hazard source to make it less hazardous. Administrative controls include work practice controls, SDS, signs, labels, safety guidelines, procedures, rules, supervision, training, and controlling personnel exposure by scheduling tasks in ways that minimize exposure levels. Work practice controls alter the manner in which a task is performed. Some work practice controls include changing existing work practices to follow proper procedures that minimize exposures. Inspecting and maintaining process and control equipment on a regular basis. Implementing good housekeeping practices. Providing good supervision. And prohibiting food, drink, smoking, chewing tobacco or gum, and applying cosmetics in chemical use areas. Safety data sheets, SDS. Safety data sheets are documents created by chemical manufacturers that describe the substance. Some information found on an SDS includes hazardous and physical characteristics, handling requirements, storage and disposal information, and signs and symptoms of exposure. Container labeling, all hazardous materials, hazardous waste, chemical containers, and chemical storage areas shall be appropriately labeled indicating the chemical identity, hazards present, and any other relevant regulatory requirements. Use personal protective equipment or PPEs. A hazardous chemical is any chemical which is a physical hazard or a health hazard. A health hazard means acute or chronic health effect that may occur in exposed personnel. Chemicals that are health hazards include carcinogens, toxics, reproductive toxins, irritants, corrosives, sensitizers, hepatotoxins, nephrotoxins, neurotoxins agents which act on hematopoietic system, and agents which damage the lungs, skin, eyes, or mucous membrane. Categories of hazardous chemicals: combustible dust, compressed gases, controlled substances, corrosive chemicals, cryogenic liquids, ethidium bromide, or known as ETBR, flammable or combustible liquid, oxidizers, oxidizers per chloric acid, pyrophoric chemicals, time-sensitive chemicals, toxic chemicals, water-reactive chemicals. Incidental spill is a chemical spill that an individual can clean up without assistance. Examples include a small spill or a low hazard spills. Hazardous spill is a chemical spill requiring the assistance of the emergency response team or outside responders. Examples include an unknown chemical spill, a highly hazardous spill, or a large spill. So this is under the emergency response procedures. Hazardous waste management. Hazardous waste, P listed waste, sharps, and the common universal waste is the light bulb. This ends the presentation.